Hello and welcome to the AdTech Heroes podcast. In today's episode, we are going to talk about programmatic and data, and I'm delighted to be joined by Lucy Marchington. Lucy currently works as a media director for the Financial Times. She ensures that the digital media products sold by the FT are of the highest quality, leveraging innovation, ad technology and data. During her time at the FT, Lucy established the audience marketing and commercial product teams, supported growth of content sales, and changed the FT's overall approach to buying. Hello, Lucy. How's it going?
Yeah, all good. Thanks. I'm really enjoying kind of like hybrid working. Actually, I don't think I realised how much I hated working in the office 5 days until I stopped it, and then I don't think I realised how much I hated working 5 days at home until we started that. So yeah, really enjoying kind of being in both home and in the office at the moment.
Yeah, it's been a mixed bag for me. I'd say there's some days where, you know, I've got two young children at home. So if they're both at home, which is usually Mondays and Fridays, I'm kind of tearing my hair out. And by the end of the evening, you know, even on a Monday, I'm like, I think I need a strong whiskey after that kind of day. But yeah, I think it's just I think the important thing is just the flexibility, right? Having that option to come into the office if you need to, which we're seeing a lot more, or a lot more companies move towards. So yeah, no, I am also enjoying the working from home flexibility as well as popping in now and again to the office.
Yeah, definitely. I found that Monday mornings are a lot less painful, but Friday evenings feel a little bit more underwhelming. But I'll take it for the Monday morning gains.
Exactly. Well, thanks today for joining us on our podcast episode. To kind of kickstart, really, I'd love to know more about your career and your background, and yeah, what's got you to where you are now.
Yeah, cool. So I guess my background's mostly been in digital marketing. I did that thing where I graduated and didn't really know what I wanted to do, and so just applied for loads of different grad schemes. And fortunate for me, I got a job kind of at publishers, kind of in marketing, and actually just really liked it. So feel pretty lucky for that. So I've always kind of been a media buyer, and what's quite interesting is that up until a couple of years ago when I started my current role, that's kind of been my whole kind of career, and then I've just basically completely switched sides, and now I'm working on the sell side for the FT, and trying to take my knowledge and understanding that I had as a buyer and use that to develop products for our sales teams to be able to sell. So we're kind of focused really on trying to grow digital revenue or improve campaign performance for marketers. So it's really nice, and I think kind of like what I've realised over time is I really like the fact that the challenges that I have, like kind of in digital marketing particularly. Working for the FT and trying to make money from ads when we're a predominantly subs-focused site. So it's quite nice. You know, I think we have to really balance that need to be impactful for advertisers, but without being intrusive. So I think I've kind of found a little bit of a sweet spot. And I think that the industry is just changing so much that as much as, you know, whilst my whole career has been in digital marketing, it's just changed. Every year it feels different. Really enjoying it at the moment. Yeah.
And how have you found that change from kind of the buy side to the sell side? And what we usually see is kind of on both sides, really. It's usually the agency side come to the supply side and not the other way around. You know, it's quite interesting, I think. And then you've got a lot of publisher side moving to AdTech side. So that's pretty much what I did. So I've worked always in publisher side, and then we kind of took that step to AdTech side. It'd be interesting to know what are the kind of key differences, or, you know, is there the buy side or sell side? Do you prefer one or the other, or?
Yeah, I'd say I prefer the sell side at the moment, probably just because of the novelty of it. You know, it's new for me anyway. But it is interesting. It's obviously, I think my previous roles were really campaign focused. So, you know, we were always looking not it was fairly longish term, but you're working, campaign to campaign, year to year. But what I'm really enjoying at the moment is, we're developing products at the moment for the FT that we're looking more, it's much more future gazing. So we're planning, for the next 2, 3, 4 years. It's much more macro, I guess. So I'm kind of, I think that's probably one of the things that I really enjoyed, just the strategic element of it at the moment. But you're right, it is quite interesting, like kind of switching sides. I think, I got a little bit of shit from people about going to the dark side of the sell side, but no, I really like it, and it's challenging.
I don't know why they call our side the dark side and the scary side. I think it's the word sales that's, or it's literally the word sales that puts people off. And I speak to agency folk all the time, and I always ask that question: would you ever come to the media owner side or the ad tech supply side? And they're like, no, we don't want to be salespeople. But the thing is, I'm always reminding them, I think sales has changed a lot in the last, even the last 10 years that I've been in the industry. That hardcore, out and out salesperson, they do exist. Come on, I'm not going to lie, they do exist. But I think it's changing. It's moving to more of a consultative manner, especially with so much technology. And you just said it yourself, every year something different is coming. So you need to adapt and change and learn. And it's a constant education, isn't it? You need to read up on things, otherwise you're just going to be left behind.
Yeah, completely. And I think, it's one of the things that we're really seeing, in our sales team, that we obviously selling into a newspaper and to a website, it's the skills you need are vastly different. And, we at the FT, we focus on the fact that the environment of, our readers and the brand safe environment of the FT, but actually getting into the nuts and bolts of it, like our sales team have to be so knowledgeable now in digital. And you're right, like it's becoming much more consultative. And, I speak to some of, our top salespeople, and, it doesn't feel as much like we've got this kind of like seller buyer relationship. It does feel more like a partnership, and it's really interesting to see that kind of evolve.
And talking about evolution, how has your role evolved over the last kind of couple of years? Have you had different roles? What have you been doing?
Yeah, so it's I think I'm on to my third role at the FT, and each of them have been slightly different. So the first one, I was working in a digital marketing capacity, and I was kind of doing content promotion. So I was very hands-on. I was building my own campaigns, going into vendor platforms and actually inputting copy and doing all of that kind of campaign work myself, which was really interesting. And I actually think it gave me a massive grounding and a really big understanding. I would almost welcome, I would recommend anyone who works in marketing to do that campaign setup work, because I think it's really important. I guess it's a bit like the McDonald's, no matter how senior you are, if you join a company, you have to do a couple of weeks on the shop floor. Like, I think it's a really good thing to do. So that was kind of my first role. And then I moved into running our paid media team for our subscriptions business, and we worked with an agency then. So it was kind of like a little bit more step back, thinking a little bit more strategically and working with them on the tactics around that. So again, that was a really good learning curve, and I think it kind of iteratively brought my knowledge on quite a lot. And especially working with agencies, like sometimes they get a bit of a bad rep, but they've got a tough job, and it was really, really interesting. And then obviously my most recent role, kind of developing products for our sales team to sell. So it has, I've been quite fortunate enough that I've managed to experience a few things at the FT, and we're quite a good place in terms of encouraging career development, learning and development, things like that. So I've kind of, every time I've seen an opportunity, I've tried to take it, because I think it's going back to this thing I mentioned earlier. The industry's changing so much. I just kind of want to just follow trends and see where it can get me.
Yeah, it seems like every year is the year of the mobile or connected TV or audio. It's hard to keep up. But just touching on your point that you mentioned, it's worthwhile getting into the nitty gritty, the platforms, the UIs. Totally get that. I think, working so long on the media owner side, I think sometimes salespeople just don't understand what's needed for a campaign to go live, or more importantly, for it to go live and for it to be successful. And I think if they really went into it and saw, it's quite simple, really. You need to get all the information to set up a successful campaign. And if you don't have that information, it's nobody else's fault. It's our fault because we haven't asked those questions. So yeah, totally get your point on that. In terms of like the product side, and you're working more on the product development, working with sales, would you say it's important then to constantly be innovating in that space? And what have you been doing, and how have you been kind of making strides in innovation with EFT?
Yeah, it's so important. It's I think the market is so competitive. So I think you have to be constantly innovating and evolving things, or you will get left behind. And a publisher like the FT, we're no longer just competing with other publishers. The introduction of social media and it's completely changed the advertising landscape. And these guys have just got massive teams. They're constantly evolving things. So I think kind of it forces us to kick on a little bit, which is quite good. And I think one of the things that it is important to remember is that it gives our sales team fresh opportunities to take to clients. I guess we're all busy people, so be able to get into the door and say, I've got this new product, I've got this new format. And kind of it really helps them just getting in the door to chat to the right people, and then they can take it from there. So I think it's really important for the sell side, but just for the business, you think I mean, the amount of marketing messages a user is exposed to, and I've heard so many varying amounts of whether how many of that actually is, and I imagine that's dropped actually since we've started working from home. But you have to find some cut through, and as users, as consumers, you just get fatigued, and you can just become completely blind to ads. So I think you have to keep moving things on just to be able to get your ad noticed and seen. And kind of within my team, we kind of have a sub team which is primarily focused on innovation. We realised, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, that unless we have someone specifically responsible for this, it just gets deprioritised. As the more people at work here, you just take things on, and you can slip into BAU or maintenance mode. So we have a team that this is their kind of only objective really, is to innovate, and it ensures that we give this the attention that we know it deserves, because it's a really important thing for us as a business.
No, definitely. I think it's definitely important with the innovation. But would you say you then need to keep one eye out on the competitors? What are the other kind of publishers doing out there, and how are you tackling that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's one of these are the things that just always slip. Is what you get so into your day to day that you stop looking at what competitors are doing. You stop listening to what brands want. You can just get really head down. So yeah, that's kind of quite an important thing for us, and we try to. I think as part of it, we try to keep abreast of what's changing in the industry, see what our competitors are doing, attending events. But we've also started this. I guess the way that we now roll out different new products is that we really try and move them into before we roll them out properly, we try and proof of concept everything we're doing with clients, so that we can kind of develop it alongside them to make sure that we're doing things that they want, that will work for them, and try and have that really open conversation as to what is and what isn't working. And it's something that we've been doing over the last couple of years, and we've got a few big clients who we partner with now who we kind of have that open conversation, and we find that bringing them on board early gives us that feedback that we wouldn't see. Without anyone, we can look at how that this campaign or this product's working from our side, but we need to know from beyond that how it's working for the client. So it's something we've started doing more and more, and it's really helping us, I guess, evolve our products and make sure that they do just perform and not just making that short-term, revenue, which we kind of, it's not really, our priority.
Yeah, and it's obviously everything that's key to this and sits at the heart of this is hiring the right talent. How has that changed? Is the FT looking at certain profiles, and whether it's product or sales roles, or kind of how has that changed over the last few years?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I've been a hiring manager for a while now, and I've seen such a massive change, and the kind of skill set of the people that are coming through now that we need is so different to when I joined the FT nearly 10 years ago, and if I were to look at my CV from then, it's vastly different. I think particularly in my team, pretty much everyone that's coming in now has got a really strong maths background, analytical thinking. It's never been so important. So many of our team use SQL every day. And it's a big part of that role, being able to just go in and be able to pull the data that we can then use, as opposed to, I think, when I joined, I used to live in Google Analytics, and it's just such an easy UI to use, but it just doesn't cut it anymore. And I think it's probably because we do use data quite a lot. And I think that, we try to push this kind of, to be data informed as opposed to data led. So we want people to be able to dig into that and then come away and take that step back and then make decisions based on kind of that, but also just a little bit of gut, a little bit of experience. So we kind of I've seen a big change in terms of my team, but in sales as well, you're seeing it. I touched on it earlier. This accelerated shift to digital. It really requires people to understand how that digital ecosystem works, and it's really complex. I think kind of like, I remember when programmatic first came about, and it was a massive shift in the industry, and it's just like the complexities were huge, and for our sales team to be able to just add that into their kind of like knowledge base is impressive. So yeah, I think you're seeing a lot more kind of digital savvy salespeople come through who are really consultative, and it's quite interesting to see.
And do you think we then lack that creativity? Because it's kind of like these data geeks are coming in and just crunching numbers, and then we're missing out on that creative element to it, or is there that sweet spot? Can you have a bit of both?
No, I agree. It's a really interesting. It's a really good point, and I think that has got lost. I think that one of the things that I think obviously with the death of the third-party cookie, it's obviously going to change a lot. Of how marketers approach the whole buying strategy, really. But I think it's going to be it's a really good thing. It's a really good thing for the industry. I think because we've been able to, track and every almost every ad metric possible. I think as an industry we've become a little bit obsessed with particular bottom of the funnel activity, and I think marketers have almost moved away from focusing on marketing objectives to ad metrics, and I think as a result of that, we have lost a little bit of that creativity and that need to think about the bigger picture. So I think that's probably going to come back, and I always think about the campaigns that I think are the most effective, and it's the ones that are absolutely nail that creativity element, and I do think that's been lost. I think we've become really obsessed with numbers and tracking and data, and so I'm quite interested to see what happens to the industry actually with when Google finally do block third-party cookies.
And have you at the FT had to make any changes because of the death of the cookie, and whether it's GDPR and privacy and anything related to data? Have you guys had to make changes on your side?
Yeah, definitely. GDPR started it. It started that evolution, and one of the first things that we did was we came out. The FT on the sell side came out of the open exchange. So it was quite a bold decision at the time, and we kind of since then we've continued to try and keep kind of iterating and making sure that we're in a good place when cookie legislation does change. So a couple of years ago we moved DMPs to our current partner Permitive, so that uses first party cookies as opposed to third. So our behavioural targeting business has been future proofed. One of the other things we're seeing, which is not a direct impact actually, but a little bit more indirect, is that obviously at the FT we've always had we have a subscription model. When our users log in and subscribe, they give us some data points about themselves, which is just really rich data about kind of like your job position and your industry and things like that. And this has always been a bit of a USP at the FT, and our audience is so highly sought after that we've kind of it kind of, I guess it's given us a little bit of a competitive advantage in market. But with what we're seeing is that as other publishers are having to start reducing their reliance on third-party cookies, a lot more of them are putting in this registration model, and obviously what they're doing is they're capturing first-party audience data themselves. So it's given us a little bit of a kick to try and evolve our first-party data strategy a little bit. So we're kind of looking at it again and making sure that that can we improve the accuracy, and can we get more granular data? Can we verify it? So just because someone's said that this is something, is there any way we can try and get them to reconfirm or to give us a little bit more detail? And alongside that, we're also trying to increase the scale of our first-party data business as well. So previously, it was just anyone who logged into ft.com that we captured this data. But what we're now doing as a business is we're evolving that to try and have that almost single login for any aspect of the FT. So our events business is now falling into that. So it's kind of the changes in the industry has pushed us to almost like refocus on our first party data and almost double down it a little bit, which is really interesting.
So is it safe to say you're hedging your bets on the first party data side rather than, I don't know, unified IDs, contextual targeting, a few of the others solutions that are kind of coming about after the death of the cookie?
Yeah, definitely. We are our first party data strategy is really, really important. We do kind of, I guess, we do have contextual targeting opportunities, and we know that that's important, and we know that the industry is probably going to swing that way a little bit. So it's always there, but I think that just to make sure, I think because our audience is so highly sought after, that's the one that we really want to make sure that we nail.
I think that's quite an important part there, is because you're such a premium brand publisher, however you want to position it, I think people will subscribe. And this is just me thinking, just thinking out loud. Whereas there's probably a lot of publishers out there that have never had a subscription model, or will find it difficult, especially the smaller publishers.
Yeah.
So I definitely think it seems like that strategy could work out really well for the FT. You mentioned you kind of cut off like your open market spend and the programmatic demand elements. Did that have a big impact? And how are the FT embracing programmatic advertising, not just open market, but PMPs and direct deals?
Yeah. It felt bold. It was, especially considering at the time it was growing. It was never the biggest part of our business, but it was growing. But we kind of we found that it hasn't had that much of an impact, and we do still sell via programmatic, just PG or PMPs, but still the large majority of our business is direct, and it's quite an interesting one because we book the trend a little bit here, and whenever we're talking to ad tech vendors, one of the first things we have to say is that like we're quite different. So think about when you're working with us, we probably break your standard model a little bit because we still are a direct business. But I think that we think it's just really important to have, I guess, that direct relationship with an advertiser, and I think kind of in that it's that full visibility of what they're buying, being able to share insights in reporting, and I think that we really want to make sure that transparency is there. And again, it's kind of coming back to playing to one of our strengths is that we have this audience, we know them quite well, they're really engaged, and what we want to do is have that direct relationship to say this is how our audience is, like, I guess, consuming the site, and this is how we then build segments off it and make sure that we can kind of sell anything that we can explain. So it was interesting, and it was a little bit of a leap of faith to come out of the open exchange, especially when it was growing, not just in the industry, but it was a growing revenue stream for the FT. But it's worked out quite well for us, and actually, over the last 3 years, we're seeing digital growth, and it's not impacting our revenue at all. So it was a bold decision, but it's worked out for us.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. As long as it works out for you, and every publisher, every media owner is very different. So a open market strategy might be their bread and butter, and they would never turn it off. Versus and going back to your point that you mentioned earlier about having that direct relationship, super important, and a lot of brands are focusing on and kind of working directly with the media owners now, rather than relying on third-party data and all the mediators in between. And if there's no value gained from working with someone in the middle, then they'll go straight to the publisher. I think that's definitely a good point. In terms of attention, what are the Financial Times doing in the space there? Because it seems like there is another resurgence of the attention economy.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, it comes back to that. I think the focus we've had on the bottom of the funnel activity, which has been so dangerous for marketing. Like I think that again, the changes with cookies. I think overall and over time, it's going to be painful in the short term, but I think it's going to be better for us. And it has. You're right. It has that focus on attention's kind of come back. I think one thing we're doing is we've got a big project actually this year that is based on metrics, and one of the things that we're looking at doing is just we really want to move the focus away from clicks. I think we've become as an industry obsessed with it. So we kind of started this project and did this big exploratory this stage, and the thing that we think that is the most powerful part of kind of, I guess, any campaign with the FT is trying to link everything back to research. So we have an internal research team, and the insights they have is unbelievable. And what we were doing is we would use this research and sales teams would lean on it heavily to be able to sell campaigns into the FT. But then we were setting up campaigns, and there was a little bit of a focus then on just impressions and clicks. Like a lot of the industry is similar. So one of the things we're trying to do is take that step back and say, okay, well, in terms of when we do research, what do we find is causing that brand uplift? So an example is we know that at the FT that if you can get frequency of 5 or above, we know that's the sweet spot, because that's when we start getting brand uplift. So one of the things we've started to do is trying to develop products that are not just trying to work to an impression goal, but are trying to get as many of those users to a frequency of 5, because then we know that this is when we'll start seeing that brand uplift. So we've actually been working with one of our key clients at the moment on this, and we've kind of, it's been a bit of a joint venture, and the whole thing was how we'll start a campaign, and the focus is not, we will hit that impression goal and that's fine, but also of your target audience that were C-suites, like how many of them can we get to have over 5 impressions? And we're fortunate enough at the FT, again, we've got this super engaged, logged in audience, so we know that they're coming back and rereading. But at the end of this campaign, we were looking at it, and I think it was, of like the C-suite target audience, I think we had like 65,000 of them were exposed to this brand's ads more than 5 times, and it's really compelling because you're changing that reporting narrative to say, in this campaign you had 1 million impressions and X amount of clicks, to say 65,000 C-suites saw your ad and more than 5 times, and we know that that's the point when you start seeing brand uplift. That's a huge number, and it's not as big as the millions that you talk about impressions, but it kind of suddenly adds some context. So it's a really big thing for us, and so we've started this project, and we've started looking at the frequency element, but we're going to start evolving this a little bit more to, how can this play into attention time, or how could this play into like reaching a certain amount of our audience. So it's kind of going to be, I think over the next few years, this is going to be something that we're going to be focusing on heavily, because it's coming back to the strengths of the FT, and I think that we can't compete in terms of reach. Our audience is finite, but also we also won't compete with in terms of like click-through rate with like the social media platforms. So we're trying to build products that work for us and work for our brands.
Yeah, it's definitely a question of quantity versus quality, right? And it's then important that we're constantly educating agencies, but also educating clients as well. And sometimes things do get, if we're not working with the client, or the client doesn't know who we are, or as a media owner or ad tech company, as a publisher, then we're relying on the agency to relay that information. So it's always, comes down to education and also relationship and building that relationship. So, the market knows what the offering is ultimately. Yeah. And I think that's super important. And yeah, we're seeing that on the Seedtag side as well now, where we're getting brands coming to us and asking those questions, and they're confident in asking those questions. Yeah. Going back to the earlier point about recruitment and getting these more consultative people with more of like technical backgrounds, they have that knowledge where they will question and quiz media owners now and challenge certain products and solutions and data sets. So yeah, I think we're heading in the right direction on that front.
That's cool. It's really good as well. I think it's that I guess in terms of, you mentioned them challenging, it's really important because it'll soon weed out the people who are behaving badly, but also I think it does help you to continue to evolve and to continue to get better, because previously you could hide behind acronyms or like whatever, whereas actually now, like, because that knowledge is increasing across the board, I think it's just making the industry better.
Definitely. In terms of the industry then, we've got one final question. Wanted to kind of take your take on it. So what you thought the future was for digital advertising?
We've talked about it a little bit earlier, but I see the future to be just a refocus on traditional like practices that worked well before. I think creativity is massive. I think this has been lost. Good creative is so important, and I think it's the biggest factor in the success of any campaign. I think environment is another thing that's going to come back. I think people are going to care more about where their ads appear as opposed to who they're appearing to. I think because we have been able to be so granular with our retargeting, I think we've kind of lost that importance of environment. So I think that will probably come back. And I mentioned it earlier, but I don't know if this is where I think it will go or whether this is just something I hope happens. But massively, I want that move away from ad metrics again and back to marketing objectives. I think we've got really, really obsessed with like ad metrics, and it's actually suited a small part of the industry to be able to become that obsessed with them. Whereas actually, I think if we can move back to that bigger picture. Particularly if you are looking at branding campaigns, ad metrics don't really help you in terms of that. So I kind of think that, going back to those more traditional practices that we've moved away from, and I love digital advertising. I think it's really interesting, but I think because we can track everything we have, whereas if you were to put a out of home ad up or, an ad in the paper, you couldn't get that reporting, but you wouldn't then question whether it was effective. So I kind of hope we go back to that kind of way of thinking.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, I think that's all we've got time for today's episode. Thanks, Lucy, for your time. It's been really great speaking to you.
Cool, thank you.